So I'm very excited today. I figured because, and I did not look up any of that stuff, Rapunzel. I'm just a bit of a mess. And I remember vividly. Okay, well. Hi everybody and welcome back to Azaria's Place. I'm missing some of my signage and whatnot, but we are back. This weekend I'm going to be continuing the challenge just because it's been a few weeks from that and I want to get back into it. So today I figured, because we just recently had an anniversary in the Disney family, to do an origin story. I know that's not the best term to use, but I wanted, I don't know, an original story, an original telling of the story. I don't know. Recently, Tangled celebrated its 10th anniversary. It was released November 14th, 2010, and it's kind of crazy how fast 10 years flies. I remember going to the theater with, I think, my cousins and my aunt and uncle to go see this film, and I'm not going to say how old I was. I just remember going to see this film and being so excited for a new Disney princess movie, because it's kind of weird when you didn't have a ton of princess movies, I guess, coming out. It's weird when all the new ones started coming out. And I remember being so excited to see this movie because I don't even know why I liked Rapunzel so much, or I think it's because I liked Barbie as Rapunzel and I was like, we're getting another Rapunzel movie and it's Disney. So I was just super excited to go see it. I remember vividly going to see that film and loving it. So we're just gonna talk about the background of Rapunzel, I guess. The idea of making a Rapunzel-themed movie has come up multiple times. It was almost called Rapunzel Unbraided, and we got Tangled in 2010, and it's super awesome. I figured today, to celebrate that anniversary, we'd go dig a little deeper and go back into the history and figure out the original story of Rapunzel. If you look it up, it says that Tangled is based on the Grimm brothers' version of Rapunzel. In my research, there are not too many versions of Rapunzel. The Grimm brothers version happens to be the most popular, but there is one prior to that, and that is Giambattista Basile's Petrocinella, which translates to Little Parsley. That was written in about the 1600s Italy, and I'm not going to go into that because that could be a whole nother video. It is also said that Rapunzel is based on a true story. Again, that could be another video for another day. If you have any questions about that, ask me in the comments below. But as I mentioned before in my Sleeping Beauty original story, I told you actually Giambattista Basile's version of Sun, Moon, and Talia, but I figured today we'd do some Grimm brothers because that's what the Disney film is said to be based on specifically, so I figured we'd go with that. We could do a whole video just on the history of Tangled, the making of Tangled, and a whole nother video on the real life Rapunzel, a whole nother video on Petrocinella. We could do it, but we're not gonna do that today. I'm gonna stop rambling. We're gonna get into the video. So this, again, is the Grimm brothers version of Rapunzel. It was written in 1857, and yeah, here we go. Rapunzel starts with a man and woman who had longed for a child for a very long time. The couple had a window in their home and they could see into a garden with beautiful herbs and flowers. However, this garden was surrounded by a very high wall, and no one ever attempted to go into this garden because it belonged to an enchantress who was, quote, dreaded by all the world. One day, the woman was looking out her window and she saw in the garden a wonderful bed of rampion that was Rapunzel. She was so enamored by this plant and the way it looked, and she wanted to eat it. However, knowing that she could not have it, she grew to look pale and miserable. This worried her husband, and because of that, he asked what was wrong. She then told him, quote, "If I can't eat some of the rampion, which is in the garden behind our house, I shall die." At this response, the husband decided to bring her some of the rampion and said, "Let it cost what it will." Because why not? He then went late at night and took some of it to his wife. She made herself a salad and ate it, and the next day she wanted it 3 times as much as she did before. Because of this, her husband then went down to the garden again. This time he was met by the Enchantress, who was angry that he would try to steal from her. She then told him that he would suffer for his thievery. He then asked if she would show him mercy instead of trying to seek justice, as he did this out of necessity. Because, again, his wife said that she would die if she couldn't have this rampion. The Enchantress agreed that if that was the actual case, that she would let him take as much rampion as he would like, and in return, they would give the child that his wife would bring into the world, and that she would care for the child like a mother. Because he was so afraid, he agreed to this, brought some more rampion to his wife, and when the woman was brought to bed, the Enchantress came, and she gave the child the name Rapunzel, and took her away. Rapunzel grew into a beautiful child, and when she turned 12, the Enchantress shut her away in a tower in a forest that had no stairs or door, but it did have a window. When the Enchantress wanted to go inside, she would cry out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had long gold hair, and would wound it up on one of the hooks on the window, and her hair fell 20 ells down, and the Enchantress would climb up her hair. After about a year or two, the king's son rode through the forest, and he passed the tower. He heard a song, and it was Rapunzel singing. He could not find a way into the tower, so he rode home singing the song that she was singing, and he continued to visit the forest to listen to her sing. One day, he heard the Enchantress cry out to Rapunzel. So the next day when it was dark, he cried out to her in the same way that the Enchantress had, to try his luck, and when Rapunzel let down her hair, he climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was afraid, but he began to talk to her and said that his heart had been so stirred, and that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Hearing this, she was no longer afraid, and he asked if she would marry him, and she said yes. And then they held hands, which is kind of cute. She told him that she would go away with him, but she did not know how to get down from the tower. She told him to bring a skein of silk every time he would come to visit, so that she might weave a ladder and then climb down and ride away with him on his horse. They then agreed that he would come every evening, as the Enchantress would visit by day. The Enchantress was not onto them or this plan at all until one day Rapunzel decides to let it slip out, saying, quote, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son. He is with me in a moment." Of course, the Enchantress is angered by this, even calls her wicked, as she thought that she separated Rapunzel from the entire world and somehow has still been deceived. In her wrath, she clutches Rapunzel's hair, specifically in her left hand, finds a pair of scissors, grabs them with her right hand, and cuts off her braids. She then takes Rapunzel to a desert to live in grief and misery. On that same day, the prince came to visit. The Enchantress kept Rapunzel's hair and let it down when he cried out to her. He climbed up to find the Enchantress, who refers to herself as a cat that will scratch his eyes out. And she also tells him that he will never see Rapunzel again. In his pain and despair, he leaps from the tower, somehow survives, but is blinded by thorns below that pierce his eyes. He then wanders blindly and wept over the loss of his wife. He roamed for years and eventually came to the desert where Rapunzel had been cast out. She is also with her twin children, a boy and a girl that she gave birth to while in her exile. While in this desert, he hears a voice and approaches Rapunzel, and they instantly recognize each other. She then fell on his neck and wept, but 2 of her tears wet his eyes and restored his sight. He then took her to his kingdom where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happy and contented. And that is the original story of Rapunzel according to the Grimm brothers. So, lots to unpack here. I don't even know where to begin. It's weird, because the beginning is kind of phrased in a way that you think that the woman is barren and they'll never have a child. Right? If you've also, just gonna put it out there, Into the Woods, another Disney film that came out recently, or not recently, but Meryl Streep, Emily Blunt, James Corden, all of them, Anna Kendrick. Into the Woods is the Stephen Sondheim musical. It has Rapunzel in that interwoven story. I could do a whole theater episode on why Into the Woods is just pure genius, but I won't do that today. But Rapunzel's storyline is in there, and so it features moments like, you know, the prince being blinded and then regaining his sight by Rapunzel's tears. As Stephen Sondheim drew a lot on this fairy tale for that inspiration. So if you haven't seen Into the Woods, I will warn it's a musical. The opening song is 14 minutes long, but if you can get past that, you can get past the whole movie. Anyways, Rapunzel's featured in that, so if you haven't seen Into the Woods, I would highly recommend. But when I was reading this, I was like, I can see how Tangled got inspiration from this story, the hook on the window. Maybe not so much leaping from the tower. Stolen baby. I mean, this one is more consensual, but stolen baby. Also, the fact that Rapunzel is like 14 when the prince finds her. Like, did we all hear me say 12 and then a year or two later? So she's about 13 or 14 years old when she meets this guy. It's unclear. I will say it's unclear how long this had gone on before she let it slip. I don't know how many skeins of silk it takes to build a ladder. I also put below how long her hair is, so it's about, 75 feet long, which actually, if you didn't know, I think Rapunzel's hair in Tangled is about 70 feet long. So that means she had to build at least a 70-foot ladder, I'm assuming. I don't know, but yeah, but it's really cool. If you didn't know, Rapunzel's name comes from the plant Rapunzel. Yeah, lots to unpack here, but I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this story. I had a lot of fun doing some research, getting to know it a bit. I love just reading them for fun. So let me know if there's a specific story you want to hear below. I'd be really interested to see what you guys want to hear more of. But it's a happy anniversary to Tangled, and it's a really beloved film. And I guess that's all I have to say about it. As I said before, I really love reading and learning about original stories of fairy tales and myths and legends. As I mentioned in the last original story I told, I was introduced to this podcast called Myths and Legends, and I highly recommend if you're ever bored, if you have a long drive, Myths and Legends. It goes from things like the Volsungs and Vikings to King Arthur and Mulan, all kinds of things. So I'm gonna move on. So it's a Disney week, which means you get a Disney fun fact with every Disney themed episode. And so today's Disney fun fact, of course, revolves around Tangled because I had to do something with the actual film today. Today's Disney fun fact is that Tangled was Disney's first PG-rated princess film, and it was also the 50th film for Walt Disney Animation Studios. With that, we're going to move on to the show tune spotlight. So I think last week my show tune spotlight on Sim Saturday was When Will My Life Begin? And I feel like it's only right to keep it again in theme with Tangled, and to tell you that today's show tune spotlight is I See the Light, which again is from the 2010 film Tangled, with music and lyrics by Alan Menken and Glenn Slater. I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video, but if I didn't, go watch Disney Cruise Line's performance of Tangled. Amazing, beautiful. I cried the first time I watched it. And if you're looking for some new Tangled merch, let me know in the comments below, and I will be sure to recommend you some wonderful sites to get some really cool stuff. So I'm so happy to be back with Azaria's Place, doing some things more full force again. I have to just get back on a new schedule, but thank you guys so much for sticking with me, for the likes, the comments, and the subscriptions. Even though I've been gone for a couple of weeks, it's really meant a lot. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until the Sim Saturday, be kind.